Welcome gamers to this one-off video. We're going to be talking about Distant Worlds 2. I'm not going to be playing Distant Worlds 2 just yet. But now is the time to bounce back into the game if you've been disappointed at all since launch and have shelved the game in your own mind. Like if you've sort of got the game, think, oh, it'll be good one day. I think the new, this latest version, this latest patch, 1.0.4.7, you can see it in the bottom corner there. I think is the one that you might want to be now trying. If you sort of got into the game and then sort of thought, oh, there's too many things that don't quite work the way that they should, or whatever else you might have sort of thought with the game. I've actually always enjoyed the game, but I certainly do understand that there's a lot of people have had issues with the game, and I've had issues with the game, but not enough to really dent my enthusiasm. But I think that now is the time, if you've been one of those people who have actually struggled with it in terms of the lack of polish, I guess, since launch, or the little things that just don't quite work. Maybe it's stability issues, maybe it's performance issues. A lot of these things have been addressed in recent times, and very, very recently, in fact, really just right up until this particular patch, there's been a lot of UI, like user interface, and also quality of life changes that have started to come into the game. Now, there'll be more and more of these coming, I would think, over the coming weeks, but now I think is the time. This is sort of like where the level has tilted back into a position where I think that people who have put this away and sort of thought, nah, not ready yet, now would be the time to try it again, but only this beta version. Don't just go with the basic version at this point in time. I'm going to go through, I'm going to have a look at the how to actually find the beta version if you've got the Steam. So I will go through how to actually access that, and we'll also go through the change list, so you just get a bit of a feel for what's happened just in the recent few weeks. And there's still actually a lot of changes to come, but as I say, I think that the tipping point is right here. This is it. This is the one that if you've been on the fence about the game and really have been, thinking, oh, I don't know if it's for me, or I'm just going to wait until it's sort of ready-ish. Not ready. If you wait till it's ready, it's going to still be some time away, I would think. But if you're waiting for it to be at a point where you'll be happy to play the game, I think that today is the day where it sort of tips the balance and starts to now sort of go towards a more positive sort of direction for you. Anyway, let's get in and show you how to put it in Steam. Right, so when you're actually in Steam, just go to your library, back up through here. Sometimes it may just go straight, when you click on that, it may go straight to your downloads page. So if it does go to the downloads page, just click library a second time, and then that will sort of take you through to the game. Now, you're probably not going to have it right here with your recent games. So just scroll down to where you've actually got Distant Worlds 2. So just go through how to actually do this. And you'll see there that mine is saying Distant Worlds 2 beta. So I'm using the beta version of the game. To access the beta, all you need to do is just right-click on it, go down to Properties, click on Properties. This then opens up this tab, and we're in the general area to start with. Go down to Betas, and then just make sure that from the drop-down area that you have in through there, that you choose whatever the latest beta is. Forget about the legacies. None will just take you back to the launch version of the game, not the actual launch version, but it'll be a much, much earlier version than 1.0.4.7. But I'm thinking that this will probably be similar to what will happen for the basic version of the game fairly soon. I know that there are still some other big changes coming, or I think there will be with the engine, and so they may not do the other update until the actual engine changes have been changed and checked and had a bit of a look at. But as I say, if you're wanting to, now is the time to jump back into it. So let's just go back. You select that particular beta, close all that. It will then download into your downloads area, and happy days, you're then going to be able to sort of then play this particular version of the game. So what do you get in Distant Worlds 2 1.0.4.7? Right, now what you'll see here is, this is actually just in the Matrix forum, so I'll just go through this particular thread through here, and you'll see that this is called DW2 Beta Update 1.0.4.7, but this was actually started quite some time ago, April the 30th, so nearly a month ago. This is actually the whole chain of these betas that sort of started way back then, and we'll just go back in reverse order to sort of see what the actual changes are. I think the reverse order will be okay. Anyway, this is the latest one that literally only came out a couple of hours ago. And you'll sort of see through here, this way of accessing it is only available through Steam and GOG. So if you've got those, it just goes through the instructions as to what to do with that one there. In fact, there's the Steam way of doing it, which was what I just showed you. So we've got a few different things. So like we've got performance improvements. So improved general performance, especially in very large late game galaxies. Now, they've made a lot of changes over the preceding month to the modelling of the game. I think that the model complexity, things like that sort of impact the loading times and so on and so forth, which the game used to stutter for people, and I find that it's much, much smoother now than what it's ever been. Sometimes you'll still get a slight stuttering, but if you've had that issue, I would give this one a go. Have a bit of a look to see if you still actually have any of those sort of problems. And please, if you do get those problems, please report them back to Matrix and the guys that are involved with the game, because they are really working hard to try to sort of get those things corrected. I think that there was a bit of a shock to everyone that there was just so many people that did have such a lot of problems, because not very many of the beta testers had the issues that sort of came up at launch. So I can say that because I was on the beta process. By the way, I do see a lot of things on Steam where people are commenting about that did the game go through a beta process, and yes, it did. And the beta process, I've got to say, was extremely thorough. It's as I say, everyone's a bit shocked with the way it sort of did launch, because the actual beta process, I can say as somebody who does a fair bit of beta testing, was one of the best beta tests that I've ever been involved in. So I can definitely sort of assure you that there was a lot of feedback. In fact, there was points earlier on in the beta process where the game there's pressure to get the game launched. And this is months and months and months prior to actual launch, and the beta testers were going, no, it's not ready yet. And then we did get to a point where it was sort of like, it was tight, but it was like, okay, yep, it's fun. It's a fun game. Anyway, that's so general performance has been improved. Fleets and ships. So fix some additional situations where fleets would not engage threats properly. Broadened the guard mission so that, now this is actually, I should just point out, in this whole chain of betas that we've just actually had, a lot of work has gone into the fleets, into the fleet management. And so this is tweaks to other changes that have actually occurred a little bit later on in what we've actually seen through here. So the guard missions have been changed a little bit. Further tweak carrier speed lower while waiting for fighters to board when preparing for hyperjump. What used to happen with this, I'll just go through how some of these problems sort of have occurred, just so that you can sort of be aware, because you may have actually had frustrations and not really realize what was going on. One thing that was happening quite often, you'd end up with a carrier that was actually almost as fast as the bombers or fighters, not as fast, but it would sort of essentially leave the fighters and bombers behind within the same system, and then have to go and rebuild them again. So it meant that you had your carrier craft would actually leave with no bombers or fighters on board to then go and engage an enemy, which is, of course, disastrous. And so they've been tweaking the speed that the carriers will then go before those fighters and bombers go back on board and sort of get back on board the actual carrier to then make the hyperjump. Ensure that tactical settings dialog closes when the select ship or fleet of another empire. This was actually a little exploit, which is, I'm glad that they've patched this. This is quite funny actually to do, because what you could do is you could actually open up, you could go to one of your ships. So let's just say you're in a combat with pirates or something like this. You could go to one of your ships, open up the tactical settings of this ship, the ones where you can sort of tell it, for example, how close to go into combat, including whether to just flee as soon as you see an enemy, those sorts of things. With that open, you could then go and click on a pirate ship, and the same tactical settings would then show up in the same dialogue. You could then go and change the pirate ship to run away or whatever you wanted to make it do. And so it was quite funny. So they've literally just patched that one. So that's I wasn't aware of it until just a few days ago. I saw it actually on the in the forums here. Somebody actually reported that in the Matrix forum, and I did test it out, and sure enough, that was an exploit that has now been closed. Fuel tankers. Now, a lot of you actually have had problems with fuel tankers. I know that when I do live streams of Distant Worlds, there's a lot of commenting about the problems with fuel tankers. I haven't never really experienced those problems personally, but I do understand them. So, and there's been a lot of other changes through this whole chain with fuel tankers. So additional tweaks to fuel tanker evaluation of when to refuel various ships roles. So example, exploration ships now not refueled until lower fuel levels. So what used to happen was the ships used to be trying to refuel different sorts of ships, whether they're in fleets or not, and it would tie up the timing of things in the game while ships waited for these tankers to arrive. Thus spending less time waiting for fuel tankers. So essentially it just means that the ships get on with what they're doing, depending on what their role is. Ensure properly excluded fuel tankers when generating action buttons. Oh, by the way, if you were just here for me, like the too long didn't read of this particular presentation is over. So we're now going to be getting into detail. So if you really just wanted to see is it worth getting into? Yes it is. I think now is the time. As I say, I think that we've now sort of turned the corner, and this would probably be I think a version of the game that people will find fun if you didn't find it fun already. So so I just wanted to make this little video just in case, because I know there's a lot of you out there that have been frustrated with the game. I think now is the time to bounce back into it if you were one of those people. So anyway, let's get back onto to what we're talking about. So the rest of this is just going to be just going through this fairly long list of changes. So there's a lot to talk about here. Anyway, the fuel tankers, and so ensure properly executed fuel tankers when generating action button for fleet retrofit. So fleet fuel tankers operate independently and retrofit on their own schedule. This was one of the early problems with fuel tankers, and if you knew what was going on, you just would never set them to manual. You'd just let them go along and do whatever they did, and they sort of just did what they did, and that was fine. Like, it never really bothered me because I never ever set them to manual, and I think that may be what that's referring to. It may not be, but I never had an issue with them because I never ever set them to manual. Still don't know if that's what that's referring to, but anyway, that was how I just got to the point where I just would ignore them. Resources. Fixed bases built at independent colonies. So example, research stations incorrectly using cargo, stock levels and cargo capacities of the parent colony. Should only do so when the parent colony is its own empire. So when you've got a star base, when you click on the resources on a star base and see what the amounts actually are, like a star base actually is connected to the planet underneath it because you control both. You can technically have a star base, I guess, in orbit around a planet that may not be yours. Like if you happen to find one, that would be the one way to actually get them. But in most cases, a star base, you will control the star base and the colony, and the stock levels are connected. If you start, like as it says through here, a research station, a resort base is probably actually even a better example than the research station. Quite often, an independent colony will be a very, very good place to sort of set up a resort base. And so in this case, it's not looking at the cargo on the planet anymore. So it's just doing its own things, which is good. So I didn't even realize, I never looked deeply enough at those to sort of see that actually happen. The next one is ensured resources and stock levels dialog does not incorrectly indicate that some resource amounts on hand are below the stock level. Now, this is, I haven't noticed this one again. That would normally mean that there's a level that's actually indicated on the planet that would be indicated in red, but I haven't seen that myself. Resources and stock levels dialog now includes explanatory note about foreign sources in tooltip for mined and known locations. This is actually an important one because quite often you would actually have a situation where you wouldn't, where it would show a source that you wouldn't know where it was from. And it used to drive me nuts because you'd sort of think, oh, great, I found I found a Caribbean spice somewhere, but it may just be that there was a pirate that had been blown up with Caribbean spice as part of the cargo that was sort of then left in space, and that it sort of would then we would sort of record that as a known source, even though it wasn't actually a mineable source. So I think that's what that's fixing. I hope that is, because that's still been a bit of a bugbear of mine. This one's the big one for me. Colonies now always attempt to stock super luxury resources when available. Caribbean spice, Loris fruit, Zentabia fluid. Even when they can meet their target development level through other, more accessible luxury resources. This is something where what would actually quite happen is that you'd end up with these super resources, like the spice, the fruit, or the fluid, and but it wouldn't be drawn into your empire, and so it would sort of sit there in the mines, but without actually being distributed, and it created like a roadblock. Where the actual development levels of the planets would sort of be then just done through normal luxury resources at the expense of these. And I think that one of the great things about Distant Worlds universe, like the first version of Distant Worlds, was that these became such important resources when you actually came across them. And I think that the game probably has to do even more work in that regard to make these sorts of resources something that you would go to war over if you don't actually have it. If you know where one is and it's not inside your areas, it would be worth taking over a colony, or worth going into combat to actually secure that particular resource for yourself. So by putting this so that it starts to flow through your economy is a really, really good thing. It may not be that they actually do enough yet, but let's see what actually happens. But this for me is probably the biggest change in this particular patch that I've been waiting for a long, long time. So for me, that's a really, really big tick. Character skills. So character skills at locations are now applied with diminishing values. This is actually really cool as well. Thus, the best character for a skill applies 100% of their skill level, but all subsequent characters only apply a steadily diminishing proportion of their skill to that area. Thus, you get 100%, 50%, 25. I guess it's a 12.5, etc. Running down with each actual, identical character at a location. This often happens, I think, when you've got things, for example, like scientists at one location. So this means that it's often better to spread characters across multiple locations instead of concentrating them at a single location. Example: admirals and generals in multiple fleets, scientists in multiple research stations, etc. And so that's actually a really interesting one as well. Now, the game will sort of do that for you if you've got that on automatic anyway. But this way you can't hedge your bets and put all of your scientists into one of the research stations that you know that you can protect. Now it sort of wants you to make sure that you do actually have them a little bit at risk. If you sort of, there may be a research station on the frontier, and now you're going to get better science by placing one of your scientists in that particular research station. So that's actually a really good change, actually, not one that I had really thought of, to be honest. So I'm happy to see that there. Updated Galacticopedia topic with characters to explain this. That's good. And slowed the growth of character skill levels. Okay, I don't know. Like I've sort of, I guess whenever you flick back, there has been pretty dramatic shifts. That's not a bad thing as well, I guess, actually. I hadn't really noticed that one. That's just a bit of a balance change. Economy and construction. Ensure that automated construction does not build too many ships at once, so minimum size, big swings in cash on hand, etc. Okay, that's actually good as well. And ensure that tourism destinations are selected more evenly by passenger ships, resort bases, plus scientific colonies. Okay, so that means we're going to get a bit more of a spread of those. Quite often what you'd see is there'd just be massive collections of your passenger ships just going around a single destination. This is now going to spread them across the empire a little bit more, which will make it more interesting, I think, as well, just visually. Will it change things technically or in reality? I don't think it'll actually do much, to be honest, in terms of the incomes, etc. But that's still a good thing. Empire bonuses, all maintenance savings bonuses now applied by dividing by 1 plus the bonus amount instead of multiplying by the bonus amount. So ship maintenance, troop maintenance, planetary facility maintenance. This means that maintenance savings can never be greater than full maintenance costs. So there's no negative maintenance as such. Now, I don't know exactly how that will apply. I'm not sure how that will apply, actually. That will be interesting. Interesting to sort of see how that one does actually sort of work. I don't think we'll notice that. Like, I haven't noticed a problem with that before, so I think it's just a tweak. Fix some bonus types were applied. Fix some bonus types being applied incorrectly. So troop recovery rate and ship energy usage. I've certainly seen the ship energy usage at different times. That'll be interesting to see what actually happens, particularly if you're away from a. I think that if you're like away from a star, I'm not sure exactly what will happen there, because the ship energy usage, you've got like a static energy usage, which is just the drain no matter what you're doing. If you turn off all of your systems and just sit in space, there's still a drain coming in, but you've also then got like energy collectors that do pick up energy. And I don't know exactly how that sort of works. I've certainly had things where ships have sort of had to use their fuel to keep the ship running, even when it's just sort of sitting in space. I don't know if that will change. I'm not sure exactly how that one does work. But anyway, it's got to be a good thing. Ensure that Empire-wide bonuses from research are properly integrated into overall Empire bonuses, so troop maintenance, savings from improved logistics project. So that's going to be good. So there's obviously things that weren't quite working there. Intelligence missions decrease success chance for intelligence missions, so diminishing value begins at 75% instead of previous 90%. Thus, spies must have higher level skills to reach higher success chance. This was a real exploit in the game, where you get certain factions that just could not lose. Like, they would just basically every single time, like, you could actually get all of your research very, very quickly through your spies. This is a good thing. I think this is going to then make the spies no longer as is important in terms of trying to get on top of your research as what they were. So they'll have a lesser role in the game, but that will actually sort of work out better, because I think right at the moment, there's certain factions, as I say, that you can just go crazy with your spies, and like, no one can touch them, like the Xenox and, you know, factions like that. Intelligence, yeah, so we've done that one. Colonization. Now exclude colony ships as available to colonize new colony while loading colonists. So assign mission button in new colonies list. Or I don't really know how that's going to impact things. When colonization range limits are enforced at the game's startup settings, now use straight line distances to evaluate whether a potential colony is in range of the existing colonies instead of path time, which causes issues when potential colonies were in the nebula. This is a really good one. This is a really, really good one. And so I hope that this is the start of one where we're going to get like a distance tool in the game, because what this then does is it means that quite often you'd have a colony that would either be in a nebula or around the corner of a nebula, where it was quite a convoluted path to get to it, even though it was really close to your empire. And so it'd be confusing as you're thinking, why can't I colonize that? And it was because the path was being calculated by how long it would take to go and sort of go through all the intricate levels of going around the path before it could actually get to that location. Now it's just going to go straight, and it's just going to measure it as the crow flies, which is a really good change. It's a simplification change, which I think is going to work better for the game, and also going to be better for the player to actually get an understanding. Because there were so many times when you'd be thinking, it's right next door, why can't I colonize it? So that should fix that up. Other changes. So fixed text display bug for colony events reported in the Galaxy News. I didn't sort of see that one. I've never noticed that one. Limit maximum number of items displayed in the summary view, so bottom middle of the screen. At Galaxy level, colony spaceports fleets to ensure that on lower resolution displays this does not become overwhelming in the late game. Again, I really haven't noticed that as being a problem, but I guess I play on a reasonable size screen. So, that's a really useful view, by the way, that summary view. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that sort of does play in, because at the moment, if you zoom out to Galaxy View, all your fleets will be there, which is, as I say, quite interesting or quite useful. All right, that's the latest. This is why I think that this version is now the one to bounce into. It's been getting close. Before that, a couple of days ago, we had 1.0.4.6, and a lot of these come about in through here where it's just tweaking the changes that have been done to the actual fleet. So fix a bug where fleet engagement range is sometimes not properly overriding ship engagement range. This has been a little bit of an issue with the changes to fleets. This was actually a bug fix on a previous beta, like a previous recent beta. Clarified wording in the Galactopedia, manually assigning refuel, repair, refit missions to automated fleets, no longer immediately changing their roles to manual. That's okay. All other mission types remain the same and will automatically change their role to manual if currently automated. So, so that's okay in through there. We'll just we'll see what actually happens with that one. It looks like just a minor tweak through there. Colony economy. So colony corruption and support costs now scale similarly to colony revenue beyond 50% maximum population. This means that a net colony revenue no longer decreases as population increases, though it will increase much more slowly. Okay, that's fine. It just means that there was a time where basically the colony revenue would get to 50% of the maximum population, then it would start to sort of go down the other side of the hill. Whereas this is good. This sort of makes more sense. Like the bigger the colony, the more money you're going to get, which is great. So that's going to sort of work out fairly well. Added warnings to new colonies list and selection panel, indicating that when a planet has low suitability for colonization and the economic consequences. I've seen this one firsthand, and this is really, really, really cool for new players. A lot of players, when they start the game, don't realise that the game is not about trying to get as many colonies as you possibly can, because they cost you a lot of money. And if they're under 20 suitability, it's even worse. Like you're going to be paying such a massive portion of your actual income to support these new colonies. So you don't want to go crazy getting new colonies. The game now tells you, or makes a point to show you, that if it's under 20, it actually has now in brackets the word low, and it's coloured now red or orange actually. So most things in the game where there's something where either something's going to be overridden or something's going to be sort of doing something now is being changed to have the actual text appear in a highlighted colour like orange. And so the same thing through here with the colonies list, with their suitability, that will now display in orange and put in brackets the word low if it's under 20. Really, really cool. I really like that change actually, because that was such a trap for players who weren't used to the game. Now at least you'll know instinctively when you look at it, think, oh, that's low. Why is that? You can then look it up. But that's a good one. It just means that people won't make that mistake. Resources are reduced to a default stock level for fuel storage at mining stations. Yeah, mining stations had massive amounts that they would try to draw in. That's now been changed. Ensured that spaceports now at colonies have more storage space at higher stock levels for fuel and construction resources. New resources are now being properly discovered and used when you acquire a ship or base with the previously unknown resource in its cargo. So abandoned bases, story events, etc. So those sorts of things. And the altered Ghost Fleet base story, this is for the humans, if you're playing as the human faction, event to always be generated at location with a fuel source. So I think there must have been instances where that was sometimes, actually I've had that happen, yeah, when I'm playing as the humans and the Ghost Fleet base will be at a position where it can't refuel. Just sort of funny. Then we've missed 3 because there would have been like 3 internal changes, and then they've got this is the next one in through this side. So fleets fixed bug where fleets would sometimes not engage threats within the engagement range. I did notice that with this change. This was actually a pretty good change actually in through here as well. Fuel tankers, automated fuel. So this is getting closer and closer to where the actual big changes were made is in terms of the fleets, and I will go through that in this episode. This will be a longish episode, I guess, as we go through all the different changes. So the automated fuel tankers in a fleet are no longer set to manual control when you set the fleet to manual or when manually assigning a fleet mission. This allows fuel tankers to remain automated and auto-delivering fuel to the fleet ships. I didn't notice that anyway, to be honest. I always did it that way, while the rest of the fleet is under manual control. Thus you can still set fuel tankers to manual control when individually selecting them. All right, that's sort of what I always did anyway. Tactical settings and tactical settings dialog, the orange warning light for fleet engagement range when military attack is manually controlled, thus disabling auto fleet engagement. This is another one where the text will tell you you've overridden this aspect by doing something. So when you see the orange text, it means that it's not going to be working the way that the text would display it as. So you'll see this in the game when you do get into it. Is now used even when selected fleet is automated. Updated the Galacticopedia topic for tactical settings to reflect updated ship and tactical terminology, and added comprehensive tooltips explaining each item in the tactical settings screen. And this is actually very good as well. So if you are playing the game, I would strongly suggest that you read those tooltips when you're actually in there, and also have a look at the Galacticopedia topic for these sorts of things, because there's been some nice changes where you don't have to sort of know exactly what's going on, but if you understand it, it does sort of certainly help. Colony ships, so further improved automated selection of colonizing race for colony ships based on queued and non-queued colonization targets. That is, attempt to select most suitable race for new colonies. That used to be quite annoying, where you'd actually have like a number of different races, like it could be independent races, inside your empire. And you'd sort of go and build a colony ship to go and get one of the colonies that's more suitable to another race, and all of a sudden you find that you've one of your substandard races is the one that actually did end up colonizing it, so that's been fixed, which is great. This applies even when you have custom population policies at your colonies that would otherwise prioritise other races for pickup. Example, resettlement. There's still there's still problems with this the population policies. I wish that there was a better way of managing that. The management for that is really problematic, and it's just a lot of micromanagement no matter what you do. So I hope that they do fix that. That's very, very frustrating. Freighters and resources, so reduce the luxury resource consumption rate at colonies by 33% to improve resource logistics across a variety of galaxy map settings and resource prevalences. I don't know if I like that idea. Anyway, it is what it is. I don't mind the fact that you had to sort of have like mining ships racing back and forwards, just grabbing luxuries all the time. So anyway, it's been tweaked, I guess. Freighters transporting resources to locations now allow some over-delivery of amounts beyond cargo capacity for each resource. This especially improves efficiency for locations that are space-constrained and thus have stock levels the same as the cargo capacity. Example, mining stations and research stations. That's fine. Ensure resource ordering it for colonies and bases. Requests excess amounts above stock levels to reduce frequency of reordering and thus reducing freighter demand. So this is to try to, quite often you'd have like freighters going all over the place and people couldn't work out why there were so many empty freighters going through space. It's just they were just going off to do other missions. They were sort of just going off to pick something up and bring it back. So it looks like they're going to be trying to control that a little bit more, so they're not going all over the place. Other changes: ensure raid countdown proceeds for bases. Okay, so that was processed for bases. It looks like maybe sometimes you'd actually get a raid and immediately get another raid at your bases. Ship missions this is actually when pirates would raid your bases. Ship missions that require docking at a colony, example, loading or unloading troops, loading or unloading colonists, etc., now more flexible about the ship position. Does not necessarily need to move to a new position if already close to a planet. This change helps these missions types complete faster. That used to be quite frustrating, where you'd actually have like a group of troop carriers, and they'd be around a planet that's got all of your troops. You would tell the troops like to go, okay, pick up the troops, guys, and then there'd be one wiggling around all over the place trying to get into the ideal location. Like, it reminds me, I shouldn't say this, but it reminds me of we got two dogs. One of the dogs, if he's going to do a crap anywhere, he's got to find the perfect little spot. Before he'll do it, he sort of ends up doing circles all over the place until he finds the exact spot before he actually does a crap. And the ships used to do exactly that, trying to get to the exact right spot before they'd pick up the troops. And so that's been fixed, which is great. Troops reserved for pickup by troop transport now immediately unreserved when the transport is destroyed. Previously it took a few seconds. Okay, it used to take more than that. Sometimes they'd actually be indicating that they're ready for pickup forever. They used to be a loop, so I don't know if that's still the case. There may still be a problem there, I would think. So this one here, 1.0.4.1, this update focuses on improvements in fleet coordination and fleet and ship behaviour. This was the big one. Now, look, in terms of fleet, some of the issues reported were due to issues in the game. Others were due to confusion caused by unclear labelling or explanation on our part, which this update should resolve. Please read through. This was actually an important one. I don't know if I can skim this, actually. There's a lot to go through with how things actually then worked with this. I'll just try to summarise it if I can. So fleet engagement range versus engagement range. So this is now fleet engagement range renamed at the fleet level and engagement range at the ship level. So ships will use their own engagement range when acting as individual ships. For example, when you have a fleet in a system and one pirate ship jumps in, per your settings, the AI may decide it does not need a full fleet to counter that ship. But if the ship engagement settings within the fleet allow, a few ships may independently intercept that pirate ship. So if you've got if you're in a ship, you've got ships in a fleet, and the fleet is set to 50% of fuel range, so they're going to be going to multiple systems if there's a problem, and a pirate ship comes in, but then the fleet ships themselves, and they're using the fleet ships, have got like the same system as their range, then enough ships will go off to attack the pirate ship to sort of take it out. So the fleet engagement range determines at a strategic level what missions and targets the fleet is in range to take on. So that's, for example, like if it needs to go off and destroy a mining station somewhere, in a different system, then that's how that would sort of then work. There is also a key fix here in 1.0.4.1. Previously, there was a gap at the system level where fleet and ship engagement ranges could conflict to override each other, which would result in the most restrictive of the two being used. That has now been resolved in 1.0.4.1. Now, if there is a target in the system and there is a fleet in the system with fleet engagement range that would allow attacking within that system, the fleet will go attack the target as a fleet, even if the individual ship settings would not allow individual ships to respond. For example, you can actually have ships set to literally hug a particular location, like there might be a mining station or something like that, but your fleet settings may be sort of changed to system, to protect the system. So that's sort of where it would still actually, like there's conflicting orders depending on whether it's fleet or ships, and so it now sort of resolves those. In other words, fleet engagement range acts as more of an override, which was intended to be. If an engagement range check within a system fails at the ship level, it can be prompted to the fleet level based on the fleet engagement range. Cool, this is actually really cool. Similarly, the fleet will not act as a fleet outside its fleet engagement range, although individual ships could still do so based on their ship level engagement range within the same system. So again, fleets could be constrained to a particular individual planet or base or whatever else it might actually be, but the individual ships might be allowed to sort of go outside that range. So it gives you a lot of flexibility with the way that you then control your fleets and your ships. I know this sounds confusing. I'll probably have to do some videos on this at some stage as to how this actually does work. It's quite intricate. Anyway, that's how that one does work. Manual fleets and military attack policies. So it's important to note that a manual fleet will not automatically respond outside its own system. So when you have and this has been around for quite some time, and I guess there's been confusion as to why fleets don't sort of work if you've set it to manual. A manual fleet basically is completely under your control. So Distant Worlds 2 assumes that a manual fleet is fully under manual orders for anything outside of the system. If you would like a fleet to automatically respond outside of its own system, it needs to be set to one of the automatic fleet roles. Now, I do this a lot in my live streams, and I will be doing, as I say, some videos on actually how to play Distant Worlds 2 in the coming months, I think. I'll probably let it go a little bit longer before I start to do my tutorial series, I think, because I want more polish in the game before I start to do that. So, for example, attack or defend, and its fleet engagement range must allow it. Also, if you have your military attacks policy in the military section of your policy set to manual, this is actually in a completely different area. This is actually just how this is how you sort of can set up how your fleets will behave. Then no fleets of any kind will respond to attack outside their own system without being manually ordered to do so. This is something where I set this one to automatic, so that if I do actually have a fleet on automatic, it will then act. If you do this one here, the policy overrides anything that you do with the fleets. So just be aware of that one. This is one that I always do keep on manual. I should show that actually. I might just show that. I'll do this in more depth later on, but essentially I've got 3 ships in around here. If you can sort of see it from this angle, that are all just part of this little fleet. This is an early part of a game that I've been playing, and so this one here you can just see 3 ships. It's in a fleet and it's set to manual. Now, if I go back and change that to one of the other roles like attack, raid, defend, or invade, what it's then going to do is it's then going to become a manually controlled fleet that the AI will then take over. So let's just go to attack in this sort of instance. So it's, attack targets us within 50% of the fuel range of the spaceport that this is its home base in through here. The home base is the spaceport. So it's now under automatic control as an attack fleet. Okay, so how do you change what the attack fleet does? Well, you go into here under military, and then you've got like a tab here, which is your fleet controls, your fleet templates. And so you've got like the different sorts of roles that you then have. So you can see attack, defense, invasion, and raiding. If I go to the attack fleet in through this side and edit this, I can then change what the settings are for an attack fleet. And so we've got the fleet, we've got the engagement range. If I say, okay, well, look, I don't want that to be so we've got do not engage when this should actually be a drop down, not instead of doing it this way. Nearby, same location, same system, sector range, 33% of fuel, 50% of fuel, and then back to do not engage. So 50% is the biggest one, and that's the default for all of these different fleet types. So let's just say we change it to 33%. It means it will leave the system if it's allowed to. This one here is fleet should retreat when the enemy strength is 50% or greater, and the fleet ship position reassignment. Ships reassign roles within the fleet as needed. I can click on that one, and it's going to be ships retain current position within the fleet. So basically, the fleet sort of controls what goes on there. Now, if we leave it like this, I can then actually, if I go back to fleet ship positions reassignment, ships reassign positions within the fleet as needed, I've then got what can happen with the actual ships themselves. So I can actually override what goes on with the actual ships. So I can actually, it's this setting through here, tactics, use fleet or ships. So this, if it uses the ship tactics, it will use the individual ship tactics, or we can override it by going use fleet tactics. And then we can go through and say, okay, engagement range for the ships in this particular one is the same system. Again, I can click on those and just go through, what it's going to actually then be, so whichever way. But you see that the furthest one out from this one is the same system. So from there it goes to do not engage. It then goes engage when attacked, engage when nearby. So within like might be a planet with any moons, it would sort of then go with those ones. Same location. It's pretty much sort of close by with the actual location itself, or the same system. This is neutral, or you could go sort of for example, most of the time I want my early ships to be on aggressive and on aggressive. So you can actually override your ship tactics here. Anyway, that's sort of not what I wanted to sort of talk about, but this is how you then set up so that when you do go and set the fleet itself, if we just get rid of that for a second and then just go and I'll just press, oops, hang on, here we are, F, grab the fleet, and so by setting that to the fleet role to attack, it should then follow those orders that we've given it in that tab. But unless, and this is what the things are sort of telling us, and this has always been the case, but a lot of people don't understand what's going on here. Unless we go into actually our Empire tab and go all the way down to policy settings, this is confusing, but don't worry, and we go across to fleets, and then we have a bit of a look, and you'll see that it's got the fleet formation. I like to manually control my fleet formation. I can leave it here and automate it so that the game will then just automatically do it itself, but I always put that onto manual. The fleet ship management, so this is the automate the top up of ships into there is automatic. I don't mind that one being there, and the fleet postures as well. In fact, there's more than this as well that you can actually then go for. If we go to military attacks, so automate military attacks against enemy targets. At the moment, I'm getting it to tell me when it wants my fleet to go off. That's the other one I think it was telling us. So if you set that one to manual, it will never go off and attack anything, even with that setting on automatic. It will never go and do it. At the moment, it's suggesting an attack to me. I could have it go fully automatic if I wanted to, where it just goes off and does its own thing. So whatever setting you like, I like it on suggest, but you can, if you wanted to, just have it on manual, which will then override this in through here, and it's pretty pointless then actually having that role. But it would still show up as being, that's what it's got, that's what it's been designated to. But the military attacks area is then is overriding it if it's set to manual in through there. That's what that setting was actually referring to. Exactly this bit in here. So if you've set your military attacks policy in the military section of your policy set to manual, then no fleets of any kind will respond to attack outside their own system. So that's what that one refers to there. Fleet, I'm just looking at the time. Wow, I thought this was going to be like a 10-minute video. Fleet attack stance, this no longer performing any necessary function given the other settings and their capabilities. It was, however, adding confusion for players, so it was removed. This was, so that doesn't do anything. You've sort of got that all under control anyway. The fleet retreat strategy, there was an issue preventing this working as intended, which should be resolved in 1.0.4.1. It should also be noted that this has a different function than the retreat when setting on the ship level. It was therefore renamed the fleet retreat strategy to avoid confusion. And so that's just going to mean sort of when a fleet will sort of then decide to leave a system, or leave a target alone. Position within fleet. So we realised that the previous UI terminology used role in two different instances. Role now refers to the general type of ship, like frigate, destroyer, cruiser. So the class of ship, I guess, is what that one would actually be. The position of a ship in a fleet within the fleet formation is now more intuitively called position within the fleet. So in the ship's tactical settings, the previous attack had been renamed to core to make it sort of more clear that this position is in the center of the fleet, whereas close escort is the inner ring and picket is the outer ring of the formation. In most cases, we recommend placing your point defense orientated ships in the picket or close escort positions and keeping your most valuable capital ships and long-range standoff ships in the core. So you just have your support ships sort of, in like an onion ring out from that particular fleet. And most ships by default will be set to core. To show that in the game, I'll show you. So back with the game running, I'm just going down to one of the little escorts that we actually have down through this side. Go to its, we can see it sort of in through here. It'll show position within fleet core. So you set this up when you're designing your actual fleets, your actual ships. So your ship design tells it what to then have in through there. That's how that one works. The ship tactical settings apply button. So we recognised that the importance of the tactical settings at the ship level was not matched by the UI in terms of the ease of adjusting them post-construction. There are now 3 new buttons available for any ship in a fleet. So apply these tactical settings to all ships of this design in the fleet. Actually, I haven't noticed this, to be honest. Apply these tactical settings to all ships of this role in the fleet. Apply this tactical settings to all ships in the position of the fleet. So if we have a look at that one through there, and apply these tactical settings to all ships in the fleet. This only affects the ship level tactical settings. You can see these by selecting a ship that is a fleet and looking at its tactical settings. So this is, if we have a look at that as well. So again, the same little patrol escort that we were looking at just before. I select that particular ship and come down to the tactics just for the ship. Because quite often what will happen is you'll actually be building ships that you want them to perform a different way in the actual fleets themselves. Like they may not be aggressive enough, or they may be too aggressive, depending on what you've done. And so you may want to tweak this. This is actually a good thing. So set tactics. This is part of the first fleet, remember, and I haven't got anything else selected except for this ship. I just go into set tactics in through here. This is our position within the fleet, so you can see their core, close escort, and picket. Back in through that side. Whoops, hang on. Just go back there again. Engagement range, again, I can sort of go and select all of those different things, and then I've got like whether it's going to be aggressive. Quite often I'm finding that I'm changing these to aggressive when they're by design, they're not set to aggressive, particularly for the stronger targets. And it might be when retreat when 20% of non-defense components are damaged. Let's just say that we're going to say, let's just play it safe, and we're going to go and retreat any non-defense components that are damaged. We want it to retreat at that point. So if I go to that one there, it only changes it for that particular ship. So, and one of the problems I used to have with the game is when you had like a large fleet, it used to drive you nuts because you'd be trying to sort of do all of the ships, usually of the same class in the actual, or its role in this case now is what it's calling it. So apply these tactical settings to all ships of this design in a fleet, and this happens so often. This is a really cool, this is what's now been added in, these little buttons that we see down through here. So I can then go and do that. So this is, so any non-defense components damaged, apply these tactical settings to all ships of this design in this fleet, click on that one through there, and it's now been applied to 2 other ships as well. If we have a look over through this side and have a look at its tactical settings, it's now going to have that then changed across. If I change this one to never retreat, stay in the fight. So I can again just go to apply these tactical settings to all the ships in this fleet. Bang, done. The other 2 ships in the fleet are now been changed as well. That's a really nice little quality of life change to the actual game itself. Fleet coordination and tactical settings. So ensure fleets properly use fleet engagement range when evaluating to attack targets. Do not downgrade to use each ship's engagement range. This used to drive you nuts when you'd have ships that wouldn't go quite close enough to like bombard a target, for example, or get close enough to use rail guns because their point defense guns were longer than what that had longer range than the rail guns, and so it used to be so frustrating. So that's been changed some time ago. Removed unused fleet stance tactical settings. Added tooltip to explain things. Yeah, tooltips. Added apply settings button to tactical settings dialog when a ship is in a fleet. So this is all good stuff. It just goes on and on through there. Improving the behavior. So when preparing to hyperjump, this is one we looked at way at the top. Carriers now move more slowly while waiting for all fighters to board, thus making it easier for fighters to catch up with the carrier. Because quite often you'd see the carriers getting ready to jump, and you'd have all these fighters streaming in behind it to try to land back on the carrier, and then quite often the ship would leave and the carrier had all these fighters stranded, which then destroys them, and then have to rebuild them on the carrier. Fixed manually assigned guard missions to fleets, sometimes not being assigned to individual fleet ships. Okay, that's okay. So a guard mission essentially is if I just go and if I go back to the game again, and if I just grab the fleet, so I've just grabbed the fleet in through here. If I do a long right click, I then get the context button, and I then just go to guard. I can go to guard, I can go to move, I can do that with anything. I can go over here, guard, Unrun 2, so I can now just tell it to go and do that. So it just has better context with what it actually then does in that capacity. So its role now is to guard Unrun 2. When investigating dangerous locations, fleets are now more careful to ensure they have adequate strength to handle expected threats. Quite often, they'd be going in for, particularly against Vorticar monsters. The Vorticar monsters are really quite dangerous, and quite often you'd see ships just drip feed their ships into the meat grinder and essentially get wiped out. Fleet's now permissive when evaluating prepare and attack missions, so if sufficient fleet ships in a target system and can handle the attack against target with less inclined to first refuel or gather, in other words, now more likely to attack targets in the same system directly without first refueling or gathering. It used to be quite frustrating where you'd actually have it was very unintuitive. You'd actually have a fleet of ships that you were min-maxing to try to sort of get certain, the classic one for me was where you'd have an invasion coming in on one of your planets, and you have a fleet trying to ward off the invading forces coming in, and so you'd be then frantically giving orders for your fleet to switch its targets to go for the troop carriers that actually had the armor on board, for example. And so you want to destroy them so that they can't get any armor loaded on, dropped into the planet. And as soon as you've got that ship turning away, the troop transport turning away from the attack, it means it's had enough and it's going to be escaping. So you then switch to the next one. And to do that, the old way was that you would by default you just do a right click. The right click button for a fleet is to prepare an attack. And so what it used to do was then it would sit there and wait, no matter what was happening, it would just sit there and do nothing because it wanted to make sure that it then got all of the fuel on board before it would then go and make the attack. So you'd have to do a long right click and then just go attack immediately, basically, and then it would sort of work as you'd want. Now it's much more permissive, so now it doesn't do that. If it can handle the attack, it goes off and does the attack. So it feels a lot more intuitive now than what it did just a few weeks ago. So we've got fuel tankers. So automated fuel tankers now retrofit and repair as needed, even when assigned to a fleet. Fuel tankers now periodically check whether target ship still needs refueling, so cancel the mission if needed. Quite often, you will override the refueling of a ship yourself, because they'll often be sitting there waiting for a fuel ship to come to them. So this one now, it just makes it a little bit more intuitive. Fuel tankers no longer refuel other fuel tankers unless they're completely out of fuel, including no fuel in the cargo. Fuel tankers are more careful to avoid locations that have damaging storm effects that they cannot handle. Fuel tankers now more careful to avoid attempting to refuel ships that will soon enter hyperspace. Instead, prefer idle ships or ships that have already reached mission destinations. Fuel tankers now more careful to avoid travelling to hostile locations when attempting to join up with the fleet. Will instead move to a nearby location free of threats. Quite often you'd find that your fuel tankers would be leading the way into an attack. It was quite funny. Ensure that fuel tankers can refuel ships even when in deep space, far away from any normal location. That's good as well. So these are all good stuff. Colony ships, so fixed bug where colony ships would sometimes load the wrong race as colonists. Yeah, that was very frustrating. Now prevent unloading colonists at colonies that cannot accept them due to either blocking population policy, example, do not accept, or colony already reached at maximum population. Art bundle changes, this is one that I mentioned earlier. So substantial reduced texture memory usage for creatures, nebula and effects. Performance issues, so fixed rare bug that sometimes allowed general game slowing down of general game performance. Ship improvements further improved auto design of troop transports to maximise fuel range by ensuring hyperdrives have full reactor energy supply. This used to be very frustrating as well. They'd be quite slow. There's a few things that have changed with this one as well. I think that the colony ships have also been improved with their automatic design, so that they actually now perform well. 1.0.3.9. So we've got more performance issues down through here. Again, the fleets were getting ready for this big change, so that was sort of like the preparation for that change. I won't go through all of that one through there. Improved selection of queued colonization. I won't go through this too much. Other changes. Is there anything else we want to be having a look at? Art bundle changes. Yeah, so again, it was sort of like fixed various issues with the art bundles with incorrect texture sizes, as well as uncompressed and unstreamed texture settings. So again, things to just change the game to try to make it a bit more responsive. So massive changes that are coming to the game, as you can sort of see through here. So this is only available at time of recording in the beta process, but surely soon it will be put into the base amount. But I do think that now, particularly with things, for example, like the resource changes and things like this, now's the time to bounce back in. I think if you've been at all frustrated with the game, I would put this beta in and just see what you think. See if it actually sort of is now doing what you want it to do. In fact, I don't know if I can show you. This game that I'm playing is actually really quite early on. If I go back into this and sort of zoom back out, do we have any colonies, potential colonies in this one? No, we don't, we won't. Oh yes, here we go. Here we go. So you can see through here, this is the one I was talking about before, where it sort of says that it's +1 in low and it's in orange, and it's telling us that, okay, the suitability is really poor. And so it says, warning, colonies with suitability below 20 incur high support costs, which may make them a net drain on your economy. So this was not a good idea to go and settle there. And it's great that the game now does show that, so that players who are playing, because I know that used to frustrate players when they first start playing, think, oh great, I can colonize these 2 colonies. These would be terrible ideas to colonize these. These are not good colonies at all. So anyway, you want them over 20 for suitability, but the game is now at least helping you to actually make those decisions, which I think is a net positive. Wow, nearly an hour. Nearly an hour to just say, hey, come and try the game again. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like the content, and I will be now sort of covering Distant Worlds 2 again a lot more. I think it's again at a position for us to go and do that. In fact, I may do a live stream in a couple of hours, I think, here on YouTube. Actually, I might do a YouTube run. I haven't done a live stream on YouTube for a little while. So we'll do that. Thanks for watching. I will hopefully catch you then if you're around.